Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today I have a quick tip video and I'm going to show everyone how to install your inner and outer tie rods with a good example here on the bench that everyone can easily see. So before we go ahead and begin, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, hit the subscribe button down below. Definitely smash that like button because it helps the channel out. And with that said, let's go ahead and get started on today's video. So what I'm going to be doing is using this electronic rack that we have that's destined for the junk pile. I'm going to show everyone how to do this in a clear example on the bench, because when it's on the car, sometimes you may not fully understand or grasp the concept, so hopefully this video can help somebody out. Now, as a heads up, we don't have new parts to install on this. What I wound up doing was I just took the old parts off of it, and I'm going to show everyone. I have them here. I'll show the little things in between, but I primarily want to focus on how you should install your inner tie rod on your rack and your outer tie rod, just to kind of give it a nice visual here on the bench. So that's what we're going to be doing today. Now, I will have this one that is fully assembled as well, that it will kind of show everyone how it all kind of looks in the end, just so everyone gets a good idea. But we also have our individual ones we're going to be installing. So let's go ahead and show everyone how to properly install your outer tie rod and your inner tie rod on your vehicle if you're doing this. So before I show everyone how to do this, I just want to let everyone know that even though this rack and pinion is a electronic rack off of a Mercedes, this concept is the same on every vehicle. These inner tie rods don't really vary. It's pretty much the same design. Sometimes they'll have a different locking method. They'll usually have like a collar here that after you install them, you bend as a locking tab. This vehicle doesn't have that. So your tie rod for the inner may have a couple different pieces. This is just to give you the basic philosophy of it. It's not really going to be what you may have as far as the installation, because like I said, you may have an extra piece. They're all exactly the same, but just how you lock them down is different. Some vehicles will come with hardware, some will come with something like this, which is Loctite, that you'll put on the threads, because the inner tie rod needs to be securely put on the vehicle, because if this were to unscrew and come out while you're driving, you pretty much lose steering. So this is a very critical step. You want to make sure that this is nice and tight and installed correctly. So typically on your rack and pinion, we're gonna zoom in here, you will have this end where the boot goes. Now yours may not look exactly like this. Again, always have the similar design of how these work, but the gearing may be different. But either way, this is the end where the inner tie rod will screw into, and then this is our inner tie rod. So the way I like to do this, and there's several ways, your tie rod may have some little cutouts like this where you can put a wrench on it. Your tie rod may be just two flat sides, but they give you some way to install it. Now, as far as installing these, they make several specialty tools. You can pick your own however you want to do it. For this particular one, since we have these flat sides and you can almost put a wrench on it, we're going to be using a really big adjustable wrench for video purposes, just to kind of show everyone the ins and outs of it. So depending on your vehicle and how your tie rods are going to be set up, this again will require maybe a different tool. It's not always exactly the same as we're going to show it in this video on that portion. So now that we're all aware on everything, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and grab my wrench, and I'm going to show everyone the proper way of doing this. Alright, now that we have our gigantic wrench, then please don't ask me where I got this, because I've had this for years. It is a cheapy wrench, as I call it, that I bought from a guy selling them out the back of his truck, and to be honest with you, it served me well. But this is what I'm using. Your tools may vary. If you need an inner tie rod tool, most auto parts stores will loan you the tools needed, so you always have that option. You don't necessarily have to buy them. But for this one, this is all we're using. And we're also going to need our Loctite. So the first step is when I get my new tie rod, or my inner tie rod, because that's what this is. Ours isn't new. Again, it's old, so just kind of follow along with me. You're always going to want to make sure that there's no grease or any damage on the threads. what I always like to do is clean it off. I grab a rag. I'll even brake clean them sometimes because they can have oil from the manufacturing process. So basically, you want to make sure you wipe it down, maybe spray it with some brake cleaner, clean off any residual oil. Depending on what came in the box with your tie rod, if it came with Loctite, you're going to be using your Loctite. If it came with, let's say, a flat washer that has like a groove channel, you're going to want to install that on this before you thread it in. Usually they will have some sort of reference in the packaging, or you can reference the old tie rod when you take it off as to how it goes. So pay attention to that. About 90% of more modern cars nowadays, they just use Loctite from what I've seen. Most new tie rods that I get in kits come with just Loctite. They don't really even come with the locks. I've even had some that have that lock from the factory, and the new ones will just, once again, use Loctite. It's also a good idea to use Loctite no matter what, even if you have a locking collar or a specialty lock that your tie rod has, just as extra insurance. And the type of Loctite that you want to use will vary. Some kits come with the high strength red, some use blue. Since this is a part that needs to be serviced and you don't really want to get it too hot, because I believe red Loctite requires heat to remove, blue Loctite just requires a little bit of effort without heat. So I like using the blue, but typically when they come in the packet, I use what that manufacturer wants me to use. Since this one's our old one, I'm just using this blue one that I have here, and I believe this one's almost out anyway. So what you're going to want to do is get your Loctite. Now I have the stick form, you may have the liquid form. It's kind of the same thing, just different approach. You're going to want to go ahead and put some of the Loctite on your threading. Now I'm pretty much out of this stuff, so we're just going to scoop it up with our little mini screwdriver here, just like that. And basically you're going to want to apply your Loctite to your threads. Use the whole amount that they give you, and it'll look something like this. Now if you can get it all the way around is good, but you want to make sure you at least get it from top to bottom of the threads. Make sure it can get all in there. Once you have that done, what you're going to want to do is start threading it out by hand. Very crucial, because if you try to put the tool on this and thread it in this way, sometimes it's going to take longer. Once you have it and it's seated, what you're going to want to do is take whatever method that you're going to be using, which in my case is going to be this big wrench here, and go ahead and tighten it up. Now since this is on a bench, it's going to move a lot. When this is on your vehicle and tighten, it's actually quite easy to put force in it. Now as far as torquing these, it's really hard to find a good torque spec. Most don't give it, and plus most of the time it's hard to get a torque wrench or something to get these things on there. My rule of thumb is get them tight. Obviously don't go crazy. Don't take your wrench like this with a 20-foot pipe and try to over tighten it like crazy and strip them, but you want to make sure you get them nice and tight. Once you've gotten them nice and sturdy and you tighten it up, you're pretty much good to go from there. And that is pretty much the assembly of the inner portion. So now that we have our inner portion installed, typically what you would do at this point is that you would want to slide in your clamp for your inner side of the boot and your boot following the outer clamp. And then after you have those on, you would install your lock nut that typically comes with the inner tie rod. If you're buying aftermarket tie rods, this is usually in the inner tie rod box only. If you need this and you need an outer tie rod, you gotta kind of call around and see if it comes with them, because I don't find a lot of kits that come with the lock nut with the outer. I wish that whether you bought the outer or the inner, that they came with this, because sometimes you're replacing the outer and you need it, sometimes you're replacing the inner and then definitely you are going to need it then. But I found it where sometimes these are so badly damaged and you're replacing an outer and your inner is good, so you got to go parts hunting for a lock washer, which sucks. Or you can usually go to a dealer and they will sell them individually if they have them, because I believe most dealers will sell these in pieces where the inner is separate, the bolt is separate. I mean, nut, sorry, not a bolt. They'll price them out that way or sell them that way. So either way, like I said, the order is inner clamp, boot, outer clamp. Then you're going to want to take your lock nut, and what you're going to want to do now, this is the old one. What I always like to do, and this is why I saved this piece here without tearing it apart. On your old one, if you kind of get an idea when you pull off your tie rod, now this one I haven't really pulled off, but if you were to take this off all the way, let's say that is how much threading you have. What you're going to want to do is kind of set your new nut, or your old one if you're reusing it, in a similar fashion, about distance wise, which is kind of right about there. Once you have that done, now realistically this is not the type of threading. Normally it'll be more like on this one was originally right up to here because I have the witness marks of the rust, so that's how much threading you typically have to work with. As far as installing your outer tie rod, and I got to make sure we are going to be able to get this in a good angle, so we're going to zoom the camera back a little bit. When it comes to installing this, there's not really a whole lot that you have to do, but one thing that I like to do in this scenario, and you don't need a lot of it, is you're going to need some anti-seize. Now I have a little bit of anti-seize here that comes with these oxygen sensors. What I like to do is I will just take a little bit of this and I will put some in here and spread it around, and also put a little bit. Now here's the thing, don't go crazy, don't get happy with this and go all over the place. Just something like this where it's a little bit will work, and we also have some on our end that we spread out. And what you're going to want to do is just start basically getting this thing tightened up and threaded on. So let's say that's where we're going to be threading it up to, which is going to be right there. We're using the old marks. Once you reach it, you're pretty much snug up. It's time to tighten this nut. Now that you have your inner tie rod basically where you want it as far as the threading, how far you're going to go in, and how you determine this is basically just by lining it up with the old one, or you can use the true Trident method where you count out the threads. The way that method works is before you remove your old tie rod, let's say this was never touched, you loosened up your jam nut with a wrench, you start counting how many turns. So let's say it's facing this way, one turn would be that right there, this would be 2, and you continuously do that until you basically get the tie rod off. And when you reinstall it, you're basically counting the opposite, saying this is 1 turn, this is 2 turn, and it basically brings you right back to the point where that's how much we loosened it. So if you were to turn this a hair and go 1 full turn just like that, and you go 1 full turn back, if you notice, that's how much our nut moved. So it's a pretty accurate way to count threads. The only times that this doesn't work really good is if your inner tie rod has different thread lengths from your new part, depending on the old one versus the new one. So now that you have this installed and you got it correctly where you want it, what you're always going to want to do, and I have to get another Allen wrench for this. Typically I'll use a regular wrench, but since I have this handy, and then what you're going to want to do is come in here, and usually you got to hold these. That's why they have like a flat. So since I have this wrench here, let's just use this one even though it's overkill. You're going to want to hold it into position, and then you're going to take your other wrench, and I should probably zoom people this way for this. My apologies everyone, I'm not good at moving the camera when is needed. So basically we have our, let me loosen this up because I think it tightened up just a little bit here. We have it set up. You're going to want to push your jam nut all the way in. Here are the flats where you can install another wrench, so we're just going to be using this guy to hold it. And then as you're holding that, what you're going to want to do is go ahead and just tighten this jam nut. Now sometimes if you don't want to hold the outer tie rod, if let's say this isn't going to move but your inner is going to move, what you can also do, and again this thing is just overkill, we have some flats here that are probably a little difficult to see, and what you can do is hold those and then basically come in here and tighten it up. Your main thing is just not to get this to move too much or too little. Now this one moved because obviously I'm doing this on a bench. It's not ideal. Normally I'll have these locked in and then tighten it up. Once you get this tightened up, what you're going to want to do is go ahead and install your boot clamps, or if you already installed them previously, then you don't got to worry about it. But basically, you want to clamp up your boot, make sure it's nice and tight. The reason why I like to clamp up my boot at the very end is because sometimes these boot clamps are one-time use, and I like to make sure the whole process goes through thoroughly before I go ahead and clamp it on there. And let's say you made a mistake or you got to go back in there, then you have to cut them off, and sometimes you have to tear it back apart to put the clamps on, if especially they're those circular ones that are kind of pre-made and ready to go. If not, normally you can spread them and just kind of throw it over. But either way, I always wait till the end. That's my tip when it comes to that. So overall, hopefully this video helps people out. It's exactly the same process on pretty much almost every car out there. Don't let the fact that this rack doesn't look like yours, scare you. It's actually quite simple to do these. Now, on the bench, it's very simple. In the car, typically, to get your, inner out, you're going to be working in, let's say, a very tight space where it's like this, like a tunnel, and it's blocked off. So you will be working from, this end looking at it. But if you got all the right tools, you should be able to get it pretty good. And one tip that I wanted to say here at the end that I always like to do, let's say you're working on the right side, what I always love to do is extend it all the way out as much as I can, because my rack right now is in the neutral state. It's in the level position where the wheels are evenly spaced. But make sure that the side you're working on, you push the tie rod end or cut the wheel as far out as you can, so that tie rod is out as much as it can, like this one right here. So this can stick out as much as it can away from anything that may be obstructing it, and that'll definitely give you a little bit more room. Because let's say the rack ends here, we have our frame here, and then this is just basically right past the frame where you can access it. And sometimes that'll help, because you might be able to just get this big old wrench in there and not need a specialty tool. So that is a very useful thing to do. Always push it out as far as it can go for the side that you're working on. And if you're doing both sides, what I suggest, do them one at a time, where you use one wheel to push it out, and do it one by one. It's just a lot easier, less confusion. Another tip that I want to share in this video that you may encounter, and we need to focus on these tie rods here. Sometimes these can be sided. So let me get these wrenches out of the way, and let me get both of these put right next to each other. If you look at these, they are not the same. If you were to put this on this side, you can see clearly where there's a design change, because these are left and right tie rods. Now, not every vehicle has a left and a right, but it's starting to become more of a trend now where you might have a right and a left. A good majority of vehicles still use just one regular style where it doesn't have a curve in it. It's just a straight one, and you can use that on the left or the right. But always check your parts, because it could be sided, just as a heads up. Aside from that, that's pretty much all I have for you. Just trying to think of anything else that you might run into here. I will say that if you do need a boot, sometimes you will have to get them aftermarket supplies, or maybe go to the dealer directly to pick up a boot if it's torn. Another thing is, if you got a torn boot and you have a bad inner tie rod and you're doing this, don't bother replacing anything unless you can get the boot, because otherwise it's not going to last, and you're going to have to wind up doing it again. It's a waste of money. So make sure your boots are nice and tight and sealed, and they're not torn. It's really easy. Just spread them open, you can see it. Common area where they like to tear up is these ends where they're clamped on. You can see this one here has a little bit of a tear in it. So even though this one is torn up, it's not so much in there. You may be able to get away with it, but I would probably still replace it realistically, because you don't want to go through this, have a torn boot, have water get in there, and basically damage the joint, and then you're replacing your inner tie rod again. Because basically in here, to get everyone zoomed in, that's where the ball and cup is right there. You see the movement in there. This is usually filled up with a bunch of grease, and if that grease washes out, it's going to rust up, it's not going to move, and it's basically going to fail. What typically will happen is the ball and cup will separate once it rusts up and basically pop out of place. Although I don't really see that happening too often where they pop out. If there's no grease, it'll rust up, cause play, and basically you'll have a lot of play in your wheel and in your steering system. So that pretty much wraps it up. That is the video. Hopefully it helps everyone out. Hopefully my tips can get you through this job fairly easy without a lot of issues. The one thing that I can't really show you here is the types of tools, because the tool will vary depending on what kind of vehicle you have. Not all tools work on every vehicle. Sometimes there's wrenches and tube designs you could slide in there that will fit most but not all. So that's the part where you got to do your homework for your vehicle on what will fit, especially in the areas where these are located. Sometimes it can be a little bit of a tight squeeze. But aside from that, hopefully everything else is helpful, and the little tips will make your life easier when you're doing this job on your own vehicle. So with that said, hopefully everyone enjoyed this video. Comment, like, and subscribe, because it definitely helps the channel grow. I hope everyone has a wonderful day, and I'll catch you on the next video.